The stock price of FuelCell Energy has been a constant underperformer over the years, but with better results than usual in the latest quarter. Are things about to change? I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at these. Probably historically the worst performing stock we've covered on the channel so far, but more about that when we talk about some of the recent news. Here's the stock price of FuelCell Energy so far this year, traded as high as, where did it get to? Just above $29 in February, and here we are trading at $7.45. As I said, they've just had earnings this month, made a profit in the latest quarter. But is it going to be enough to change investor sentiment with the stock being so far off the highs for the year so far? Are we going to see a turnaround? I'll talk a bit about some of the recent news around the stock, some of the history, which was quite eye-opening. Then we'll come back onto the platform and look at the charts and the technicals in a bit more detail. Hello, I'm David Jones from Capital.com, and I thought this time round on the Stocks channel, we'd look at, I think, what can be fairly described as something of a bombed out stock. We're going to take a look at the stock price, some of the recent news around FuelCell Energy, and see if perhaps we could see a turnaround into the end of the year. So as usual in this video, I'll talk a bit about what the business does, some of the recent news, then we'll jump onto the platform, take a look at the technicals in a bit more detail, and you can see just the size of the decline from the highs this year. But more about this when we get into it. As usual, if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, if you could click on subscribe, it does help support the channel. It means we can continue to push out lots of content throughout the week on the various stocks that we look at. Right, let's take a look at FuelCell Energy in a bit more detail. So the company designs and manufactures direct fuel cell power plants, and these are an alternative to combustion-based power generation. So it's a clean energy, and I think we all know what a big topic that has been over recent years. So it generates electricity from natural gas or biogas, which then generates hydrogen. And this as a company targets the sort of static power generation markets rather than, for example, the likes of Plug Power, a company we've covered before, which targets transportation, forklift trucks and the like. But what may come as a surprise, it's not a company that just came to the market in the last couple of years. It can actually trace its roots back to 1969. And it did come to the market via IPO back in 1992. So it's been around a long time, but I think it's not been the most rewarding of stocks, to say the least, for investors. Just this century, in 2004, for example, the stock price was as high, allowing for adjustments, as $2,800 per stock. And at the time of recording, it's trading below $8. So you can see perhaps the disappointing performance over the years. So bullish investors for the stock would see this as great potential as a clean energy source. And again, we know what a hot topic that has been. But so far, looking at that share price performance over the years, you can see this has not been able to translate into steadily increasing revenue and profits for the business. In fact, it hasn't generated annual profits in the last 2 decades. Just think about that for a second. It's a long-term investment. So I think any people who are still hanging on really are keeping the faith that eventually it's going to crack it. But looking at the performance just this year, the highs it reached in 2021 and where it's trading now, it's down about 70% from those highs. So, a stock not for the faint-hearted, I think is perhaps one way of putting it. They had a bit of a better quarter. Revenue in the latest quarter, the third quarter, which was reported earlier in September, came in at $26 million, which was up compared to what it was a year ago. The company did make a profit in this quarter, just over $1 million. So a good quarter, but again, doesn't really change the longer term perspective so far. But is this better quarter enough to change investor sentiment into the end of the year? We'll have a look at the charts in a second. Let's look at the levels to watch first of all. So for me, lots of recent support, shorter term support from $5.30 to about $5.90 on the downside. And on the upside, as you'll see on the charts in a second, I think the next big hurdle, it's a bit of a distance away, but it's coming in around $8.30, the 10th of August highs, and then another level, and perhaps $10 as a psychological barrier. But as usual, to put some color on these numbers, let's take a look at the charts and examine FuelCell Energy in a bit more detail. So we've only got data going back for the year so far, pretty much. But I think that's enough to go on, considering the volatility that we have and looking at this one into year end. As usual, let's start off with a moving average. So we've got a 20-day moving average here on the stock. And these are good when stocks or markets are trending, not so good when the price is sideways. So you can see a sell signal right back here, February the 17th, as it fell below the 20-day moving average. Did try to push above it a few times on the way down. We didn't really get another buy signal until May of this year, which ended up being pretty much short-lived. The latest signal we've had over the last week or so, as the stock moved through $6, it's crossed above the moving average, giving us a buy signal. So that's bullish, I think, in the short to medium term. But we need to temper this with the fact the stock has been trading pretty much broadly sideways since July, a fairly wide range, plenty of volatility, but still broadly sideways overall. If you take a look at the RSI down here, it's a 10-day RSI. You can see it's almost got near overbought on that latest move up the day before yesterday, up to $7.75. So it's suggesting from an RSI point of view, perhaps the stock is a little bit overheated, overstretched at these levels. So perhaps we could see a bit of weakness. Let's take a look at the chart in a bit more detail. I suppose if you wanted to be bullish and think we're going to see a recovery from here, you could argue the stock has been attempting to build a base over recent months with the recent low from mid-September down at $5.30. So this whole $5.30 to $6 zone, we have seen the buyers come back in. But on the upside, I think that the hurdle is around about $8.30. So we've got a wide range. We've got a $3 range here, so a 60% trading range. But for me, I think, and for lots of technical analysts looking at charts and the price action, we really need to see a break through $8.30 to suggest that perhaps, yes, this time around, we are going to see perhaps more of a sustainable recovery. But bear in mind that RSI is looking a little bit overheated on the upside, so it wouldn't be surprising if we saw weakness from here. So I think for those who want to look for potential buying opportunities for the stock, I think there's a couple of things here to watch. First of all, if it starts trading back down to sort of $5.30, $6, let's see if the buyers come back in and lift the stock once more. If it breaks through $8.30, it looks like we do have a bit more momentum again, and we can start perhaps targeting the $10 zone as the next objective. But given the performance of this stock over the last couple of decades, it's been a really disappointing one for investors. This year has turned out that way as well. We did have those a profitable quarter just gone, so that has, I think, helped to lift the stock over the last couple of weeks. But now it's whether it can break out of this sideways base. So it's an interesting one to watch. As I say, perhaps one more for the brave, given the longer term performance. But we'll come back and do an update if things change. That's it for this update. As I said, perhaps one for the more adventurous out there. It has been a very disappointing couple of decades, at least, for any people who are still holding the stock. Let's see how it performs into the year end. We'll come back and do an update if things change. But for now, from me, David Jones and Capital.com, we'll leave things there. Good luck with your investing.
For more trading videos just like this, please subscribe to our channel.